I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media. And today on the Crypto Coin Show, we have Adam Grodzki, the CEO of 3S Game Studio. Adam, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me tonight. It's a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Let's dive into the future of gaming. How does Web3 integrate and add value to the gaming industry, which is a huge industry? I think the market cap is a lot bigger than cryptocurrencies overall right now. And when these two worlds combine, I feel like it's going to be a revolution for blockchain technology, NFTs, and Web3 overall. So I'm excited to get your insights into it. I would love to kick off our conversation with just a little bit from you on what you and your team have built around 3S Game Studio so far, and then we'll dive into all the details.
Okay, so just getting my opinion, I'm a very technical person, and we are all just coders, senior staff coders. So there is great potential in Web3 technology, especially IPFS and blockchain right now, that is not really fully tapped into gaming. Most of the projects in gaming right now are experimenting mostly with financial aspect of the blockchain, where there's really great benefit of using blockchain as a technology without the financing in it.
I would love to know more about that. And is that something that your team is focusing on specifically on? You know, from what I have heard in gaming, I've seen tokenization of in-game items and decentralized marketplaces to be able to extract value from that. But right now it appears that it's really startups that are starting Web3 that are really taking this movement forward, and we've yet to see a lot of these large companies that have millions of players adopt the technology yet.
Well, most of the large companies are responsible to the shareholders, which means that they need to generate revenue. So if we see any implementation of blockchain technology by those companies, we can safely assume that it's going to be monetization. But when it comes down to indie companies, there is the best possible innovation on the market right now. So our goal is to get blockchain technology and IPFS into as many hands of developers as we possibly can. And the main goal of the tools that we are developing is not to make them as a black box that you have to use in a very particular way, like we want you to use it. It's just a full implementation of all the possibilities, and how you're going to implement it is up to you. It can be monetization, of course. We don't have anything against that, but it can be everything else.
I'd love to explore that a little bit more. What are some of the possibilities for indie games in the ways that they can make a better product with 3S's tools?
So basically, currently we have two products on the market. One is a blockchain plugin, and second is an IPFS plugin. So the blockchain plugin is a full EVM implementation, which means that you can contact any EVM blockchain. So not only Ethereum, but even like custom blockchains that you can run as a company. And you can interact with any wallet and any contract. And the plugin itself has full cryptography and everything regarding communication that you need to sign transaction and manage keys offline, on premise. So each game installment for each player is a wallet internally. So by using our plugin, you don't have dependency on us. You get it as is with full source, and you can use it however you like. And you don't need to use our external services in any way. This helps to, for example, in multiplayer games, offload a lot of information that is being passed through from players to server and from server to players, because they can communicate directly with the blockchain, and the server and the players can read information from blockchain also directly.
That's
the second product, the IPFS plugin, uses IPFS currently in the most obvious way. So you can basically save and load any file from and to IPFS dynamically, which means that any game that has user-generated content can share this content in a very easy way. And by loading and saving anything, I mean literally anything, because in Unreal Engine you can just store even very complex classes, references, and structures inside a save game file. and such file already has full functionalities to hot loading. So you can just share those save game files and use them not just as save game, but you can use them as a way to transfer a lot of information in between players. And for multiplayer games, all you have to replicate in between server and the clients is the CID, so the identifier of the content, instead of replicating the full content. And the content can be recreated on premise, which is really great for live service games. But we plan to go further with that.
Very cool. And with the, speaking to the wallet, communicating through EVM chains, I'm guessing that your team's implementing some of the layer 2 solutions like Polygon or something that's a little bit faster and more efficient than the Ethereum blockchain.
Polygon is basically level 1 solution. It's an alternative to Ethereum. But yeah, it is a lot faster, and it's one of the main networks that we support, and we even do example content with Polygon. But we also support Avalanche and many other networks that are also very fast. We are currently implementing communication with level 2 networks, but they are even more demanding when it comes down to cryptography and just very high level math. So that's going to take probably 2-3 months before we have something working.
Very cool. And how many different indie developers are sort of already using this technology?
Currently, just by our sales and support, I would say over 100 teams.
Wow.
We are also doing development and web consulting on projects, but I can't speak too much about that because we are under NDA. But there are some projects that are using our help to implement this technology, but many teams very easily manage to implement it themselves within just a few days.
And you mentioned at the beginning about the traditional companies, the large games. They obviously have a lot of shareholders, and the decisions they make to implement this kind of technology will be through additional revenue or ways to generate value for those shareholders.
Ubisoft Quartz.
Yeah. So where does this transition happen, where we move from 3S servicing all these indie game studios, finding ways for them, they find ways to generate a lot of revenues, and then this technology gets picked up by those large companies that they see that this technology can find ways to generate revenue. Where does that shift happen, where we expand into the larger gaming ecosystem?
I think that the main thing that we need to convince current developers who are so-called Web 2 developers that there is clear benefit of using Web3 technologies, that this is not just a different way of more convoluted and complex way of doing things. Like I often get questions about why would I use blockchain if I can just use a database? But there are answers to that, right? Like with blockchain, you have this entire security level that is already implemented there. It's just all the cryptography, everything is in place. So all you have to do is manage your keys. You don't have to host the database. You don't need to be responsible for securing it. And there is no single point of failure that someone could just DDoS a gateway to your database. So there are clear benefits of Web3 technologies. And there's many of those.
For sure. And in the gaming industry specifically, is security something that the game developers need to be super cautious about?
Well, when your game starts to be a wallet at the same time, then yeah, it's super important to handle the keys as carefully as you possibly can as a developer. But I think that the approach that we have, where the keys are being stored on premise, and if used properly, they are never even exposed to the internet. All the signatures are being done offline on the user side, is a lot safer than using an external service that is also a key custody service. Because if this service gets hacked, then all your players have a problem. But if a particular single player gets hacked, it's just his problem. And usually it was something that he did.
Good point. And you mentioned about the second update regarding IPFS, the interplanetary file system. I'm curious more on how that functions, and from what I understand about storing data on IPFS, there's also drawbacks compared to storing it on a centralized server. You can talk about the benefits and the drawbacks of integrating that technology into these games.
Sorry. Honestly, I think that IPFS as a technological stack is even more significant to Web3 development than blockchain. It was the second thing that we started working in the Web3 space, and we thought that blockchain, it was really amazing for us to work with it. But then we found out IPFS, we're like, yeah, simple stuff, right? Just sharing images, sharing JSON files. In those JSON files, you can share different parameters for weapons or anything, right? And then we started to think about sharing save game files and what can be a save game file. Basically, anything can be a save game file. But then we went a step further and started to check, okay, but what if we would want to modify games? What if we want to distribute mods? What if we could distribute the entire game through IPFS? And so happens that it's actually very much doable, especially with Unreal Engine 5, which with Unreal Engine 4.27, so the last release of 4 and now 5, it brings a new functionality which is called modular gameplay features. So in general, when you are designing a game and you are following certain good design practices, you are trying to fragment your code as much as you can. So have just as little dependencies in between classes and references as possible. With modular gameplay features, you can separate entire features of a game into a very specific plugin. And this plugin can be absolutely isolated, and you can turn it off and on live without resetting the game. So if you design your whole game as modular features, like for example, there is an example content called Lyra by Epic Games, which is very popular right now as a starter point for many games. It utilizes those features, and it holds different maps, different characters, play modes, weapons. It can be very complex set of rules, and it can be also modifiers to dynamic data tables. So you can very easily distribute as a game feature a DLC, an update to a game, a balance patch, anything you like. So with this modular gameplay features, you can also package them when you are packaging the game separately. And you can mount those packages dynamically at runtime. So that means you can fragment your game into functional, smaller pieces that make sense on just design level, and then you can ship them all to IPFS, and then you can use either blockchain as a manifest source, or you can use IPNS, which is also part of the IPFS stack, to make like an update stack that is showing you the latest version of things for the game. So with this, you can update your game live without even resetting the game. You can distribute additional content like DLCs. You can make a creator for add-ons for your game, for mods, and you don't have to ship full source of your game to make that possible. And you can allow people to use those mods with this feature. You can basically distribute your game in fragments. So you can have like multiplayer, single player separated. When you think about recent games, like let's say Call of Duty, it's 150 gigabytes. The smallest consoles have like what, 320 gigabytes hard drive? So if you install Call of Duty and you also have like some spare size of the disk that is required for system updates, you basically can fit one more small game or nothing. You just have Call of Duty and that's your life, right? So it ships with single player and multiplayer. So separating just those two would be quite a big big save of space, but you can go further. Like you have cosmetic items, right? When you are starting a match, do you really need all cosmetic items? No, probably just the cosmetic items that the players in the match has. So with this, you could pre-download only assets that are necessary to run the latest map and latest feature you are playing. And by the end of the play session, you could flash them from your disk, delete them, or store them for future references. You could have full control over that. So we made like an example project to show this in work. We got down from 2 gigabytes project to 40 megabytes.
Wow, incredible.
And then every map was something in between 80 to 120 megabytes pack that was downloaded on demand when it was necessary.
Wow, that's amazing. And I feel like more so every day, people are really fiending for customizability, downloadable content, mods to sort of make the game their own.
Yeah, and also to bring assets that are absolutely outside of the game, right?
And how, when you switch from this more centralized model of the size of the game, moving it into different packages, it makes it that much significantly smaller? Is it just that you're only loading what's necessary? The overall size of the game is the same in totality, but you only need to load what you need for the current point that you're playing at?
Yeah, so yeah, the full game is still exactly the same size, but how you are downloading elements of the game can be managed by the developer or by you, whatever the developer allows you to do, right? So you could, for example, delete maps that you are not playing, or you could just delete content that is not essential for your gameplay, or it could be automatically managed by the game.
Very cool. And with the IPFS storage, you mentioned the example of you have a hard drive on your console and it's only 320 gigabytes. Are there limitations to how much you can store on IPFS? From a lot of people's understanding, the blockchains are very large and it's hard to store large files. How does that work with the amount you can store and how quickly you can download what you need?
I mean, the amount that you can store is the least of the problem. You just have external services, or you can run your own service of IPFS and just store content, even in a cloud service, and just run it like on-premise in your company in the cloud, right? But your service, even if you are uploading to your IPFS node, is not the only node that you can get the content from. So it's getting automatically propagated throughout the network. So again, there is no single point of failure when it comes to getting this content. It's just about how well the content is propagated at a certain point. But the more the content is being fetched by different nodes and more users are using this content. And when we're talking about popular games, we're talking about millions of users, right? So this content gets more popular, more populated, and is more accessible. Also with gaming, of course, fetching content live and swapping content as you are in middle of a session is also very much doable, but that requires a lot more like in-front preparation to make the packages as small as possible, because still with IPFS the biggest problem right now is just the speed of downloads, right? You won't be able to download absolutely unlimited amount of content within seconds, but still with games you have a lot of preparation time. You go into main menu, you name your character, you interact with certain parts of the game while the rest of the game knows exactly what the next part is, and it can prepare exactly the next part in advance and notify you when it's ready and you can start your experience. This is still better than installing entire game from internet having 150 gigabytes. Because still you have to spend the time that it takes to download it, but you have to take it in one session and you just cannot play. While with this system, you can start the experience almost immediately.
Very cool, Adam. And moving into 2023, what do you see as the next major steps for the integration between this kind of Web3 technology and gaming? Will we see the big players move in very soon, or what else do you think will be sort of the major narratives for Web3 gaming?
I think the big players are still watching with slight suspicion on the Web3 space, and it's up to us indie developers to prove them that this is a viable solution. And honestly, I'm not so fond of the AAA studios. Like, there's a lot of really amazing indie studios going on right now that are developing a game, like StarCraft creators, creating their dream RTS that's just Blizzard would never do because it was too much of a risk. And many other examples of just veterans starting up an indie studio, and if we can get a really amazing game, it will be from them. So our goal is to make the tool as accessible, as easy to use as we possibly can. So we want to make a lot of additional automation, just ease of life improvements to both tools, add as many blockchains as an option, and just make it as easy to use as possible.
Incredible. And what's the best way for people to follow along and learn more about 3S?
I think the most alive community that we have is our Discord. I could then share the link with you.
Sounds great, Adam. Thank you so much. I will definitely leave the link to the 3S Game Studio Discord and the other social links as well in the description box below. I appreciate your insights into the gaming industry, and it's very exciting to see these kind of innovations move into the gaming world and these two industries combine for added value. I think it's going to revolutionize the game industry, not overnight, but in the next coming years, it's going to completely change the way that people play games. So I really do appreciate your insights, and all the best with 3S moving forward, and let's follow up in the near future.
Thank you very much.